So in this video, we're going to be talking about the key economic questions and economic goals to introduce ourselves into defining economic systems. So I first want you to imagine you going to a grocery store. And I mean, we do that every day. I have to go to the grocery store today, probably. So you're looking at all of the varieties of the food. You're thinking, what am I going to buy for dinner? But then you start to realize that the government has started to limit your choice. For instance, think that there isn't all this food on the shelves, but there's only one kind of cereal, and it's the gross, really thick, weedy kind. You know, the kind that gets soggy in like 2 seconds. But it's good for you, so the government decides that's all you can eat. Or a specific type of juice, you know, high pulp, it's high calcium. I don't know what juice has. I don't even drink juice, but now I'm made to drink juice because there's nothing else. Because what if they take away soda? Diet Coke. Why? But really, seriously, it could happen. But what? Actually, it couldn't happen. But think further. What if you now didn't have a grocery store to go to, but you were told by the government that now to be more sustainable, I don't know, you could only eat what you find or can grow in your garden? I'm seriously would starve. If you've seen my thumb, it is not green. I couldn't do it. So to make this kind of idea of, okay, well, what does that have to do with economic systems? Well, it has everything to do with economic system, because who's making the choices? Who's answering these three really important questions? What, how, and for whom? They have to be answered because everything's scarce. So in a society, how these questions are answered and who answers these questions and makes the decisions, that really breaks down and decides and defines what an economic system is. And remember, an economic system is the structure of methods and principles that a society uses to produce and distribute goods and services. So, I mean, it's right there in the definition when you think about it. The methods and principles that a society uses to produce and distribute goods and services. That all identifies with this. Well, you have to figure out what is actually going to be distributed, how is it going to be produced, and I am so bad at drawing lines, and then who are you going to give it to? So the answer of what goods. So each society has to decide what it's going to produce, whether it's going to be satisfying the wants or satisfying the needs. You also have to look at the fact that there's minimal resources. So how much are you going to devote to defense? How much do you devote to education? How much do you devote to consumer goods? And I can't speak. All of the decisions come with an opportunity cost, because there's always a trade-off. There's always going to be, well, let's produce more of this, but then because the resources are scarce, then you can't produce something else. And I'll mention this again in just a minute because it goes back to a very important term we have already studied. And so then how? So, you know, there is so many different kinds of ways that we can put resources together that we would really need to figure out how we're going to get this good created. I mean, even just looking at, well, what fuel should be used to generate electricity? I mean, electricity is important in production. And then you have, what's the best education model to put in public schools to deliver the service of education? Those hows, the transient, the getting from raw resources into the hands of the people is an important question to answer, because you also have to figure out, how is the society making the decision? Is it private industry or is it going to be government? So everything can be really consumed and combined in different ways, and these decisions require trade-offs, like I mentioned before, because when you're looking at that opportunity cost and the trade-offs of making the decision of what and how, you really are bringing into that idea guns and butter. Looking at here, you have all these raw resources that are just laying around. I mean, I don't know, are these cave people? Could be. So producers, whether it's the government producing or private industry producing, they have to make the decision. How do we allocate the resources, and then how do we make that into products, goods, and services? So those trade-offs and those decisions really do come down to the whole guns and butter. When a government's intervening to then distribute and to kind of put in the government resources, which remember guns is very wide an idea, and then or the consumer goods and the butter, that mixture of intervention or decision making is going to then put the economic system on the economic spectrum and the free market spectrum. The who consumes, basic part of the question. It all comes down to how we distribute income. When you have certain prices that are high, you're going to have more difficulty distributing that amongst the society. But when there's intervention to create the prices low or income to keep it, then you're going to be able to distribute them more evenly. Every way that you look at these three questions, there are challenges. Really, any kind of society needs to kind of figure out how to answer these questions and overcome the challenges. I want you to think about this though. These seem like pretty basic questions, but put yourself in different scenarios that can be and how you agree with it. Should the government try to influence the types of crops farmers grow and the kinds of animals they raise? Should producers be allowed to produce any kind of product they want, no matter what is the distribution outcome or, the how many and who it's going to? Should there be able to be a limitation on fat content? Or should a producer be able to put as much fat as they want in food? It really does make it taste good. Then, of course, should the food be made available to people who can't afford it? Or is it only for those who are able to obtain the resource? Who's going to make sure it's distributed fairly? Who's going to make the decision of who gets to be considered have access to those resources? So make sure to check the next video on economic value, so part 2, to learn how societies are going to actually go about answering these questions. What drives them? Who starts to answer them because of basically what they value most in society? So stay tuned.